Hello everyone, this is Gene from NYC. It is Saturday, it's a little after 10 o'clock. I've had breakfast, I'm in a relatively good mood, and guess what the subject of today's video is going to be? Meow, meow, meow. Spider-Man. I read Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 1 and 2. This is going to be the review of issue 1. Dear God, issue 1 is not good. I don't know how in the world they released that in its incomplete state. I don't. Issue 2 actually is a lot better. It has its flaws, but issue 1 is trash, and once I start the review, you'll understand why I'm saying that. So before I get started, I just wanted to go over a few things. First of all, I have 3 new subscribers. YouTube is not giving me your YouTube names, so I don't know your names. Otherwise, I would shout you out, but I have 3 new subscribers, so thank you. Welcome to the channel. I hope you continue to enjoy the content. I also want to apologize for not making a lot of content this particular week. In between work and life, this week has just been very rough on me. And when I'm not working or dealing with life stuff, I'm sleeping. But I was able to read this comic. I was able to read Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man 2. I was able to read Goddess Mode. And actually, Goddess Mode, I read Goddess Mode 1 and 2, and I'll be doing a video on that, but Goddess Mode is so bad that it broke my brain. It broke my brain in the worst of ways, and I actually had to take 2 days off from reading comics just to get back into the mood to read comics. So, I just wanted to explain why I haven't made videos in the past several days. It's just been a very rough week in life and in comicdom, because again, it's just more poorly written, poorly thought out, unedited. It's not even like poorly edited. At this point, it is unedited work was released, and I read it, and it pissed me off, and I just had to take some time to like calm down and sleep, because dear God, work and life has just been wearing my little butt down. But anyway, I just wanted to get those things out of the way, so I'm going to start the review. I'm hoping to not take too long, because honestly it isn't worth my time, and I'm not in the mood to make 2 videos on 1 trash book. So, as I mentioned earlier, I read Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 1. The writer is Tom Taylor, the artist is Juan with 2 N's, Cabal. The editor is Nick Lowe, and the assistant editor, I believe, is Kathleen Wineski. I think that's how you say her name. Yeah. This was not a good issue. Not at all. The one decent thing is that the art's pretty good. And the colors are nice. Now, the art has its issues. The art from Mr. Cabal is very sharp, very clean, very smooth. And it's nice to look at. It's not, ugly or hard. It's aesthetically pleasing. But it's very, very, very sterile. Doesn't really have any life to it. And this is especially evident in Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man number 2 in some scenes. But in 1, it's not as bad, but you can see it. There's not much life in the drawings. They're clean, but lifeless. It's very sterile. Also, he's not very good, at least in my estimation, having read these 2 issues, at facial expressions that are meant to be intense or perhaps sad. There's one panel in the story where a woman tells Peter that she had lost a loved one in an elevator or something like that. And Peter, from the dialogue, sincerely believes what the woman is saying. Right? She's actually just sort of pulling his leg, because he was asking about why she won't take elevators. But at the moment, right, before she reveals that she's joking, he believes her. The dialogue demonstrates that. But there's this one panel which is just a close-up of his face, and he's over-exaggerating a sad face, right? He's doing the super deep frown, the puppy dog eyes. That does not look sincere. That does not look like a sincere face of sorrow. It looks like he's over-exaggerating and overacting for comedic effect. which would be nice if, for example, he was, playing around or joking. He wasn't. The dialogue makes it clear that he sincerely believes at the moment what the lady's saying. So he's sincerely thinking that this woman lost, a loved one due to some sort of elevator issue or malfunction. He should look like it. He should have a sad, sorrowful expression, not this comical, goofy puppy dog eye and deep frown thing. So let me just recount the story from the top, go over it, point out the issues, and just tell you why I think this is such a trash book. I'm just going to say outright that if I had to give this a letter grade, it gets an F. It gets an F so bad. Mainly for Tom Taylor's writing and for lack of thought when it comes to the various scenes. Now I'm going to start from the top, go through it, explain it, and then y'all can tell me what you think. So, on the very top, we have the cover, which actually is pretty good. I think Andrew Robinson did the cover. And it's nice. It's a close-up of Spidey scaling some building. And he's crouched, and he appropriately looks spider-like. I was like, okay. The art for the cover, it gives me a slightly creepy vibe, which I actually, especially with the way Peter's legs are drawn, which I think actually works because it's more reminiscent of a spider. And as much as I hate to say it, I don't like spiders. It's part of the reason I don't really read or watch Spider-Man. For example, this game is my brother's, it's not mine. So I don't like spiders. Spider-Man is not a character who particularly interests me. So you might be wondering, well then, why are you doing a Spider-Man review? 2 words, Yellow Flash. He did a video on the second issue of Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and when I saw that video and I saw the reveal at the end of Spider-Man of Friendly Spider-Man 2, I was like, no, it's got to be no. So I read it myself. It's true about the old lady, and then I decided to read issue 1 because issue 2 actually is not all that bad. But issue 1, oh my god, it's a good thing that I didn't read issue 1 first, because if I had, I wouldn't have read issue 2. But anyway, that was a little sidebar. I didn't mean to do that. Let me get back to the main part of the story. So, the cover creeps me out a little bit, but I actually like that about it. Now, in the summary page, it sums up Peter's backstory and his motivation for becoming Spider-Man well enough. But it's just one thing, and if you're a Spidey fan, because again, I'm not super knowledgeable on him, but if you're a Spidey fan, can you please tell me, is Peter antisocial? Because the summary page after the cover says that Peter Parker was antisocial. I'm like, I don't recall Peter being antisocial. Antisocial is when the person rejects society. Peter was bullied. Peter was a nerd. That's different. So, if you're a Spidey fan, please let me know if it's accurate to say that Peter Parker was antisocial. I know there's literally 100 different variations of him and different takes. And again, I'm not super knowledgeable, so I'm gonna rely on the wisdom of the crowd. Has he ever been antisocial? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think someone who calls himself the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man is going to be antisocial. But who knows? So anyhow, the story actually starts out pretty good. Peter's observing Spider-Man, I should say, is observing Liberty Island, and he's reflecting on fear. He's thinking to himself about how he's been frozen in fear, and he recounts that when he was early in his superhero days, he would be scared to jump off buildings and take that leap of faith, because of course all he had to rely on when he did that was his homemade web fluid and his newfound powers. But then he would hear, someone cry out for help, and, his need to help them would override his fear, or I guess outweigh is probably a better term, his fear, and he would jump and go help them despite his fear. And I was like, okay, I like this opening. it really sets up the type of character Peter Parker is, and the type of hero Spider-Man is. The man who, overlooks his own fears to, not overlooks, but I guess puts aside his own fears because he's still scared, right? But a person's safety, a person needing help, is more important to him than his own fear. So I was like, okay, I like the way the story is starting out. And then the next panel shows him swinging and in the glass. It's a really cool effect. In the glass buildings that he's swinging by, there's a reflection of several major important parts of the story of Peter Parker. You see Black Cat on one glass panel to the left. You see the death of Gwen Stacy on another one on the right. You see that famous panel where MJ standing in the doorway and she says to him, "Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot." Those sort of those iconic Spider moments that everybody knows. So I'm like, okay. There's a few issues here and there. Like, for example, there's one scene where Spidey's doing this whole thing, right? The whole shooting the web, but there's no web fluid coming out of the top of the wrist, right? It's just showing him doing the hand motion, but no web fluid actually leaving his wrist. And that's something that actually happens in several panels throughout this story, where he's supposed to be shooting webbing, but nothing comes out. But or at least it's not drawn, right? It's not that it's malfunctioning and not working. It's that the artist forgot to draw one of the most iconic moments of Spider-Man, which is the webbing coming out of his wrist. But anyway, overall, the beginning is actually quite good, but it just goes down. It rolls down a hill from here. It's very, very, very bad. So the story proper starts off with a very dangerous situation. A truck has veered off a bridge, and it's crashed into some sort of structure, and basically it's teetering on the edge of the structure, and it's going to fall over any moment. So Peter sees this, and he decides, of course, that he's going to go help. Here's what I want to know, and I want to be clear. I read this twice and skimmed it once to make sure that my criticisms were fair and I just wasn't being biased, because I'm not interested in Spider-Man for the most part. And every time I read it, and the time I skimmed it, the same issues came up. And here's one of the first issues. The scene is, car is teetering on the edge of a bridge, city structure type thing. It could fall over any moment. Why aren't there newscopters in the sky? Why aren't there police driving to this scene? Why aren't there firefighters and ambulances surrounding this area? There is no way in the world this type of scene happening in New York City is only going to attract the attention of Spider-Man and spectators. Whenever something crazy here in New York City happens, like a crane collapses, a building explodes, someone is about to jump and commit suicide. Whenever something crazy like that happens, it draws everybody. It draws a crowd, it draws the news, it draws the police, ambulances, firefighters, everything, because it's a serious situation and people's lives are on the line and people's safety is on the line. So it absolutely infuriates me reading this scene, and I again read it twice, skimmed it once, to see that there's nothing here again showing that news and or first responders were not called. It's just not true. It's just not true at all. That would never not happen. When stuff like that happens in New York City, it becomes news for the rest of the damn week. So I call all the shenanigans and all the BS on that alone. Anyway, so Spidey gets to the van, right? He sees that there's a father and a daughter in there. The father is trying to keep calm while the daughter just says once, "I'm scared." That's it. Again, this is a child in a car that's about to teeter over, could very well die, and she's not freaking out. She's not asking her father if they'll be okay. She's not asking things like, "Daddy, are we gonna die?" Regular responses you would expect a child to have. She's just sitting there, and the only dialogue box she gets in this scene is, "I'm scared." You see, when you have people like Comics Matter, your boy Zach, point out that they don't human well, this is what he means. This is what all the commentators and all the critics mean. A child would not behave this way. If the kid wasn't passed out from just the shock of it all, it's more likely that they would be screaming, crying, having a fit. It's more likely that the dad would have to grab her by the shoulders and tell her to calm down than her to just sit there and go, "I'm scared." And yes, I know people have delayed reactions to fear, and not everybody reacts the same way, but still, it is more likely than not that a child, if they're awake, is going to express fear and be freaked out and be scared than to just sit there and just say one word. It just does not ring true. So nothing in this issue rings true to life, to human behavior, to anything. So anyway, Peter hops onto this car, tries to figure out how to get them out. And there's actually this really cool panel where he basically double kicks. I wouldn't call it a drop kick, but he double kicks the passenger side, not the passenger, the driver's side door open to rescue this father and daughter, which is great. But here's the problem. After that panel where we see him fly through, I wouldn't say fly through, but he's drawn with his body, going through both windows of the car and kicking out the driver's side door. The next panel after that is an explosion, right? Because it's implying that the car fell and exploded. Number one, cars are not made of explodium. Okay? A car, if they fell from that height, most likely is not going to explode. Now, it may catch fire. That's possible. But unless the car conveniently fell, leaked gasoline, and then happened, and then the gasoline, sort of traveled or spilled to where a live cigarette is on the ground, that's about the only way I could imagine it would explode. Cars are not made of explodium. If they were, every time you heard about a car crash on TV, you would be hearing about third-degree burns and charred bodies. They don't explode, generally speaking. So there's that. And then with the explosion, which is supposed to be happening at Coleman Playground, which is on the Lower East Side and near Chinatown, you have these three idiots standing behind a fence that's not even 5 feet away from the explosion. Those three idiots should be dead. No one's going to stand that close to an explosion. Okay, they would be overcome by the heat. They would be burned. They would be blinded and choking and unable to breathe because of the smoke from an explosion. But no, they're just drawn there, standing behind this chain link fence, which is not going to contain the smoke in the least, taking pictures. Yes, I know, people are spectators, people can be dumb at times, and they take pictures of disasters. I get it. But depicting these three people that close to the explosion, which shouldn't happen in the first place, but still, it happens. You want me to believe that these people didn't die? That they're just, bystanders being bystanders. No, none of this rings true. None of this rings true. So then, after Spidey lands, right, then the girl actually gets scared. But she's not scared. It's not as if, suddenly everything catches up with her. No. She's scared because she sees the spider emblem on Peter's chest. Right, on Spider-Man's chest, and she, puts her hand down trying to squish the spider on his chest. That's what frightens her and sends her running to her dad. the spider on Spider-Man's chest. Not the fact that she nearly died, but the spider on Spider-Man's chest. I think this was intended to be funny. Tom Taylor, this joke went nowhere because it makes no sense. And this is something that Tom Taylor does a lot in this book, which irks me. He tries to have every thought bubble or that Peter has and almost all of his dialogue be jokey in some way. Okay? Witty people, sarcastic people don't tell jokes every single second of the day or every single time that they speak. The reason why they're known to be witty or sarcastic is because they will make a joke usually when it's appropriate, when there's a setup, when there's an interesting and funny coincidence. They don't force it. That's what makes humor humor. It develops organically. And when you try to write every thought that Peter has and every piece of dialogue that he speaks, whether as Spider-Man or as Peter Parker, as a joke, it's not funny. You're trying too hard. Stop it. So there's that. So after Peter saves their lives, the father wants to give Spider-Man $300 as a thank you. Peter says no, or Spider-Man I should say, says no and suggests instead that he give this money to 3 homeless people he knows. I want to repeat that. Spider-Man, right? Peter Parker, who is supposed to be from Queens, New York, from Forest Hills, who has lived in New York City most of his life, right? Grew up here, is suggesting that the person who wants to thank him, with money, with $300, give that the person with the $300 give $100 each to 3 homeless people. We don't like to give homeless people 50 cents here in New York City, and for good reason. Oftentimes, the homeless, at least around here, unfortunately, take whatever money that they do get, whatever money people do give them, and they spend it on things like cigarettes and liquor. I know, because I've given and I've seen it, and that's why I don't give to homeless people anymore. But you have Spider-Man, a lifelong New Yorker, saying to give $100 apiece to 3 homeless people. Tom Taylor, do you know how stupid that sounds? Let me ask you, Mr. Taylor, if you were walking down the streets of Melbourne, Australia, or whatever part of Australia you're from, and you saw a beggar on the street, would you give them whatever the equivalent of $100 is in Australian money? I don't know what type of currency they use in Australia, my apologies. But would you give them the equivalent of $100 USD? I highly doubt it. Because you know that it's highly likely they are not going to hold on to that money or buy anything useful with it. It's highly likely they're not going to buy food. It's highly likely that they're going to spend it on a vice. So, just that whole scene. It's the stuff that's lacking. No police cops, no police cars, no firefighters, no police choppers on something that would have been on the 6 o'clock news, on the 10 o'clock news, on the 11 o'clock news, on the 24-hour news cycle, on CNN, on local news, on international news, on everything. And you want me to believe this is actually happening? No. Editors, where the hell were you? Wineski, where the hell were you? Why didn't you read this scene and go, yeah, that's not how this works. This would never happen. Rewrite this. So anyway, the next important thing is that Peter, as Peter Parker, right? He's out of the Spidey suit. He goes and he helps this old lady take her groceries up to her apartment. I already mentioned the part about when she talks about having lost a loved one to an elevator accident, and Peter pulls that over-exaggerated sad face. So what happens is once he gets to her apartment, she tells him that there's a neighbor, and she thinks the neighbor's in trouble. she believes that the neighbor's in hiding, and she wants Peter to go check on the neighbor. Okay, so Peter goes, and I'm gonna be clear. This old lady emphasized that this woman is living in fear and in hiding. So Peter goes to visit the lady who's supposedly, again, living in fear and in hiding. First of all, when he gets to her door, we see that there's only one lock. That's it, one lock. You want me to believe that she's living in fear, concern for her safety, is hiding, and yet she only has one lock on her door. Why don't we see like 5 other locks on the door? That gives a better visual representation of that she's living in fear than one lock does. But more importantly, so she opens the door, and that's the thing. She opens the door. Again, she's supposed to be living in fear, scared, terrified. But she just opens the door. Fully exposes her face. First of all, she doesn't look scared in the least. She looks mildly concerned because, again, random guy at her door. And she's like, yes? A person who is scared doesn't act like that. Okay, I live in a dangerous neighborhood, and whenever someone knocks on my door and I'm not expecting it, okay, I unlock the lock, I leave the chain on the door, and I put like one eye out, and I'm like, who are you? Because I don't know who the hell they are. And I live in a very dangerous neighborhood. That's the way she should be behaving. You want me to believe Tom Taylor, Juan Cabal, because he did the art. You want me to believe this woman's living in fear, yet she just opens her door. What if it had been the people she's scared of? What if it had been somebody who just had a gun and just decided to just blast her in the face and kill her? How in the world am I supposed to believe she is scared when she doesn't act scared? There's even a panel right after she opens the door and shows her face where Peter notes to himself that she's terrified. But I just saw her face in clear view. There's no expression of fear on her face. And it's not as if Peter's spider senses is going off or anything to indicate that somehow he's getting a sense or he knows that despite the relatively calm look on her face, she really is scared. Nothing in the art, nothing in the dialogue indicates that she's terrified. So she asks Peter if he knows Spider-Man. He says yes, that he kind of knows him. Then, she asks if Spider-Man knows better heroes, and Peter's like, oh, that mentally he's like, oh, that's a critical hit to my ego. So they're talking, and again, that they're having this conversation in the hall. Like, it's not that, for example, the woman, opens her door, looks around, and then pulls Peter in, and they have a conversation. No. They're having this conversation in the hall, to the point that the woman actually steps out into the hall and closes her door behind her. She left her apartment to have this conversation with Peter, and she's supposed to be living in hiding, and she's supposed to be scared and terrified. How do you write this? How do you write this and then have the art totally disprove every damn word? How? I don't understand it. I don't understand it at flippin' all. Anyway, so they're having this conversation again in public. She's supposed to be terrified, but they're having this conversation in public. And then she tells Peter that Peter asks her if she can go to the police. She says no, that there are people, whether there's a man that's very powerful and very connected. And then Peter asks, well, did this man hurt you? She says he hurts everybody. Again, right in the hall where anybody could hear, when anybody could pass by as they're coming to and from their apartments. They're just having this conversation because she's totally living in fear. So it's only when Peter asks her if she wants to go have lunch with him, all of a sudden she starts acting like she's scared. And then she says no, she can't leave. But she, thanks him for the kind thought. And he says, well, if you can't come to lunch with me, what if I pick up lunch for you? So she agrees to that, which is fine. Peter leaves the building. He happens to, conveniently enough, run into the 3 homeless people that he was talking about earlier. Apparently, the man that he saved kept his word and went and gave these 3 people who are homeless $100 each, because that makes sense. And then they have this. They go to a hot dog stand. They go to a hot dog stand, buy hot dogs, because that's what people do in New York City. You have hot dogs with homeless people. And keep in mind, the 3 homeless people that we see don't look homeless, right? Now I know that, sometimes people are living in shelters and whatnot, and they may not necessarily look homeless. But Peter mentions earlier in the story that these people are living in an encampment. I think like under a bridge or something like that. An encampment. They're not living in a shelter. They're living in an encampment. But they're walking around looking like regular people who are just dressed for the cold weather. Tom Taylor, have you seen homeless people in New York City? They don't pass as regular folks, especially if they're living out on the streets. They look dirty, right? Their clothes are ragged. They're covered in dust because they're destitute and have no home and have no shelter. If he had said that these people were living in a shelter, okay, I could kind of understand how they don't look too bad. But they're supposed to be living on the street. Again, Tom Taylor, what New York City are you writing in this story? Because I want to go there. I want to go to the New York City where the homeless still have enough resources to dress appropriately for the cold weather and pass like anyone else, look like anyone else, where people give them $100 and they don't waste it. And you can have a hot dog with them without them, acting crazy or being belligerent or asking you for more money. And I'm not trying to be mean on the homeless. I am not. I have all the sympathy in the world for their plight. But this is not how real life works. Okay, I know Peter in this story means well. But what he's done is actually set these 3 people back. You don't give destitute people money like that. It doesn't help them. It's like that old saying, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach a man to fish, you feed him for life. But I wish Peter had encouraged this man to do was to donate to a homeless shelter or a homeless organization, which actually helps homeless people, get a job, get an apartment, deal with whatever mental or personal problems they have that led to being homeless in the first place. Because there are many homeless people, for example, who are in depression or schizophrenia, they have mental issues, or they have addiction problems with drugs or liquor or gambling, and that's a big part of the reason why they ended up homeless. But giving a homeless guy $100 is not going to change his life. Okay?